It's strange how life has a way of circling back, sometimes in the most unexpected and unsettling ways. I never thought I'd find myself face to face with my past in such an uninvited and abrupt manner, especially not involving the people who had once torn my life apart. But there she stood, Melissa, my stepsister, at my doorstep, looking gaunt and desperate. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of the arrogance she once wore so brazenly, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame, faded and frayed from years of wear. The memories of betrayal came flooding back in an instant, piercing my peace like a dagger. To understand why seeing Melissa after all these years was so jarring, you'd need to go back to where it all started. I was 28 years old, but it felt like just yesterday that I was 23, blissfully engaged to Greg, my college sweetheart. We had met during my second year of university, and our relationship had weathered the stress of late-night study sessions, part-time jobs, and endless exams. Greg had been my rock, my constant through the whirlwind of young adulthood. I had been so certain of our future that when he proposed, there wasn't a moment of hesitation. The engagement period was a bubble of joy and anticipation. We planned everything together, from the flowers at the ceremony to the playlist for the reception. My parents were supportive, excitedly discussing details with us. My stepfather, whom I had called Dad for as long as I could remember, was over the moon. He had raised me since I was a child, filling the void left by my biological father, who had disappeared not long after my birth. He was my only father, and I was his daughter, regardless of blood. But while my parents and I prepared for the wedding, Greg was nursing a secret that would shatter everything. It wasn't until a week before the wedding that I learned the horrible truth. Greg and Melissa, my stepsister, had been having an affair for months. On the day I was supposed to marry the man I thought was my forever, I was left with nothing but a hastily scrawled letter. Greg wrote that he had fallen in love with Melissa and couldn't marry me, claiming that it would be a lie for everyone involved. He said that he believed fate had brought me into his life, not as a partner, but as a bridge to his true love, Melissa. The betrayal felt like a tidal wave crashing over me, leaving me gasping for air. Greg's family, horrified by what he had done, covered all the costs of the wedding, sparing me the financial burden, but it did little to ease the humiliation and pain. We severed all contact. There was nothing left to say. My parents, on the other hand, were furious. My father even considered hiring a private detective to track them down and drag them back for answers. But I stopped him. I couldn't bear the thought of confronting them. I just wanted to forget, to pretend that the entire nightmare had never happened. Growing up, Melissa had been the thorn in my side long before she stole my fiancé. We weren't related by blood. My mother had married her father when I was 8. Melissa's mother had passed away when she was just a baby, succumbing to a sudden epileptic episode in the middle of the night. While I could sympathize with her loss, Melissa never seemed to accept me as her sister. From the day our parents married, she treated me not just with indifference but with outright hostility. In school, Melissa was the classic bully. She commanded a group of friends who delighted in making my life miserable. They mocked me, played cruel pranks, and ensured that my school days were a living hell. At home, the torment continued. My parents tried to discipline her, but Melissa was fearless. She would mock their threats and carry on as if nothing had happened. Her defiance only grew with time, and by high school, it had morphed into reckless behavior. Sneaking out at night, drinking, smoking, she ticked all the boxes of a troubled teen. It wasn't until she was arrested with her friends for breaking into a house while drunk that my parents finally took drastic action. My father sent her to a rehabilitation center for troubled teens, despite Melissa's protests. She stayed there through the end of high school, living with an aunt near the center and attending a different school. Those years were the most peaceful of my life, free from her shadow. My parents visited her regularly, asking me if I wanted to join them, but I always declined. I wanted nothing to do with the girl who had made my life so difficult. When Melissa returned after graduation, she seemed different. Quieter, calmer, even apologetic. The first thing she did was offer me an apology for the years of torment. She told me she had spent her time away reflecting on her actions and wanted to mend our relationship. I was skeptical, but moved by her words. With college just around the corner, it was easier to forgive and move on. We didn't become close, but the hostility was gone, replaced by a fragile truce. During college, we led separate lives. I moved out, as did she. We only saw each other during the holidays, and even then, she kept her distance. It was a peaceful arrangement. When I met Greg, our paths began to cross more often. He was charming, attentive, and kind. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, and I was happier than I had ever been. When I brought Greg home for Thanksgiving, I was nervous about introducing him to my parents, but he fit in seamlessly. Even Melissa seemed engaged, participating in conversations with a genuine interest I hadn't seen before. Over time, Melissa and I started talking more. She reached out to me, asking to meet up or chat. It was out of character, and I couldn't help but wonder if she had a hidden agenda. One day, I asked her outright if she was trying to befriend me because of Greg. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case. She explained that Greg had spoken so fondly of his siblings that it had made her think about her own relationship with me. According to Melissa, she had realized that she had been unfairly punishing me for things that weren't my fault and wanted to change. I believed her. It wasn't easy, but we started rebuilding our relationship. She was involved in my life in small ways, helping with wedding preparations and showing up to family gatherings without the cold detachment that once defined her presence. I thought we had reached a new understanding. I thought we were finally sisters. But that illusion shattered the day I found Greg's letter. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. The man I loved and the sister I had cautiously let back into my life had been deceiving me for months. I begged my parents to let it go, refusing their offers to hunt the pair down. I couldn't handle the added chaos. I sank into a deep depression, barely functioning as I tried to work through the pain. For weeks, my days blurred into a cycle of work and sleep, an attempt to block out the ache in my chest. And just when I thought I couldn't feel any worse, I received a postcard from California. It was from Melissa, complete with photos of her and Greg, smiling and carefree. She wrote that she was sorry for the surprise before the wedding, but it was obvious she wasn't apologetic at all. She wanted me to know they were happy, that they had each other. It was a cruel taunt, one that set me spiraling into sleepless nights and therapy sessions. The postcards kept coming for months. Each one featured a different scene. Them at the beach, dining at fancy restaurants, sightseeing around California. My parents were livid when they found out, cutting all contact with Melissa immediately. They had been willing to forgive her before, assuming she was still figuring herself out. But this act was beyond redemption. Melissa lost more than just her family's support. She lost her future. My father had planned for Melissa to inherit the family business. She was a business major and had spent her college years preparing to join him, but after she ran off with Greg and continued to torment me, he changed his mind. He offered me the chance to take her place, even though I had majored in history and knew nothing about running a business. I hesitated at first, unsure of stepping into a role that was never meant for me, but my father insisted he would teach me everything. And so I began to learn. It was difficult at first. The business world was foreign to me, filled with jargon and challenges that pushed me to my limits. But I persevered, fueled by the need to move forward, to rebuild myself after the betrayal. Over the next few years, I grew into the role. My father retired, and I took over, successfully steering the company to new heights. It was an accomplishment that filled me with pride and a sense of belonging I had never felt before. I threw myself into work, and gradually, the memories of Greg and Melissa faded into the background. Therapy helped me confront the lingering trust issues, and for the first time in years, I felt truly content. I had moved on, or so I thought. Then one Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, so I assumed it was the pizza I had ordered. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a delivery driver standing there. It was Melissa. She looked nothing like the woman I remembered from those smug postcards. Her eyes were hollow, her clothes old and ill-fitting. The confidence that once bordered on arrogance was nowhere to be seen. "Can we talk?" she said, her voice trembling. I stood there, stunned into silence. She took my lack of response as permission to continue. "I need your help. Greg lost his job months ago, and things have been bad. He's been drinking, not looking for work. I've tried to find a job, but no one wants to hire someone who hasn't worked in years. I heard you took over the business, and I was hoping you might be able to help us." I stared at her, the audacity of her request so baffling that I almost laughed.